Welcome to another video for 8-second attention spans. This video is a biography of Senator Bernie Sanders. September 8th in 1941, Bernard Sanders was born in Brooklyn, New York, to a working-class Polish-Jewish immigrant and his American wife. Sanders attended elementary school at PS 197, where he won a state championship on the basketball team. The young Bernie attended Hebrew school in the afternoon. He had his bar mitzvah in 1954. Sanders attended James Madison High School, where he was captain of the track team. Bernie went to Brooklyn College for a year before transferring to the University of Chicago. While at the university, Bernie was involved with the Congress for Racial Equality as well as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. In 1962, Bernie led a rally at the U of C Administration Building to protest University President George Beadle's segregated housing policies. Sanders and 32 others entered the administration building and camped outside the university president's door, performing the first civil rights sit-in in Chicago history. Bernie participated in the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. That summer he was charged with resisting arrest during a demonstration against the segregation of Chicago schools. He was fined $25. In 1964, Bernie graduated from the University of Chicago with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. Sanders worked various jobs after graduation and even spent time on an Israeli kibbutz. Sanders began his political career in 1971 as a member of the Liberty Union Party. Bernie Sanders ran as the Liberty Union candidate for governor in 1972 and in 1976. He was also a candidate for senator in 1972 and 1974. In 1979, Bernie left the party and began working as a director and a producer for the nonprofit American People's Historical Society. There, he produced a half-hour documentary about famed socialist and presidential candidate Eugene B. Debs. In 1981, Bernie Sanders ran for mayor of Burlington, Vermont. He defeated six-term Democratic incumbent Gordon Packett by a mere 10 votes. Sanders went on to win an additional 3 terms, running against both Democratic and Republican candidates. In his final run for mayor in 1987, Sanders defeated Democrat Paul Lafayette, a candidate endorsed by both Republican and Democratic parties. Bernie's administration balanced the budget and brought a minor league baseball team, the Vermont Reds, to Burlington. Bernie campaigned against the unpopular plans of a Burlington developer to convert the then industrial waterfront property owned by the Central Vermont Railway into expensive condominiums, hotels, and office spaces. As mayor, Bernie Sanders undertook extensive downtown revitalization projects. One of his signature achievements was the improvement of Burlington's Lake Champlain waterfront. Today, the waterfront area includes many parks and miles of public beach and bike paths, a boathouse, and a science center. Burlington is reported to be one of the greenest and most livable cities in the United States. During the 1980s, Sanders was a vocal critic of the U.S. foreign policy in Central America. After serving his 4th term, Bernie Sanders chose not to seek re-election in 1989. He briefly taught political science at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government that year and at Hamilton College in 1991.
Bernie Sanders, it's time for change, real change.
The television and the television industry plays a really important part in preventing serious debate about the major issues facing our country.
In 1991, Bernie Sanders was the first independent elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 40 years. Bernie was a critic of the Patriot Act. As a member of Congress, he voted against the original Patriot Act legislation. After its 357-66 passage in the House, Sanders sponsored and voted for several subsequent amendments and acts attempting to curtail its effects and voted against each reauthorization. Sanders was a vocal critic of the Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan. Sanders told Greenspan that he was concerned that Greenspan was way out of touch and that you see your major function in your position as the need to represent the wealthy and large corporations.
Do you give one whit of concern to the middle class and working families of this country? That's my question.
Congressman, we have the highest standard of living in the world.
No, we do not.
In October 2008, Greenspan admitted to Congress that his economic ideology was, quote, flawed. In 2005, Bernie Sanders proposed an amendment to limit provisions that allow the government to obtain individuals' library and book buying records. In 2005, Sanders voted against the Online Freedom of Speech Act, which would have exempted the internet from campaign finance laws. On April 21, 2005, Bernie Sanders entered the race for U.S. Senate. Senator Jim Jeffers announced that he would not seek a 4th term. Speaking on the night of his election, he said the people of Vermont have told America that they are sick and tired of right-wing extremism. President Bush and Vice President Cheney, this state is going to move America in a very different direction. In a victory speech that was vintage Sanders, he promised a fight for universal health care and the rollback of tax breaks for the rich. On September 24, 2008, Sanders posted an open letter to Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson decrying the initial bank bailout proposal. It drew more than 8,000 citizen co-signers in 24 hours. In January 2009, Bernie Sanders and Democrats Robert Byrd, Russ Feingold, and Tom Harkin were the only majority members to vote against confirming Timothy Geithner as the United States Secretary of the Treasury. On December 10, 2010, Sanders delivered an 8.5-hour speech against the proposed extension of the Bush-era tax rates that eventually became law, saying enough is enough.
We should be embarrassed that we are not investing in our infrastructure, that we're not breaking up these large financial institutions, that we're not putting a cap on interest rates.
Sanders' speech was published in February 2011 by Nation Books as The Speech, a historic filibuster on corporate greed and the decline of our middle class.
We should be embarrassed that we are for 1 second talking about a proposal which gives tax breaks to billionaires while we are ignoring the needs of working families, low-income people, and the middle class.
Progressive activists like Rabbi Michael Lerner and economist David Korten voiced their support for a prospective Sanders run at the presidency. In early 2015, Sanders became the ranking minority member of the Senate Budget Committee. He appointed economics professor Stephanie Kelton, a distinguished modern monetary theory scholar, and presented a report aimed at helping rebuild the disappearing middle class, which includes proposals to raise the minimum wage, boost infrastructure spending, and increase Social Security.
And people weren't so sure I could beat the richest person in Vermont to become a United States Senator. So I would say, don't underestimate me.
In the initial stages of his campaign, the mainstream press continually ridiculed or ignored him. Even as he began drawing the largest crowds of any candidate, the mainstream press continually ignored him, preferring to focus on the buffoonery of Donald Trump.
I'm really rich.
Then something happened that the politicos did not count on. Millennials, millions of millennials, excited by the prospect of a Bernie Sanders presidency. A lot of seniors soon got on board. Bernie had unleashed a tidal wave of energy, a seething energy that had been suppressed through 35 years of neoliberal economics.
And that is what this campaign is about. It's bringing people together.
Soon he was drawing large crowds, not only in liberal strongholds, but in red states like Texas.
Huge.
Bernie had articulated something about America that had been almost forgotten. It was that same spirit that had been articulated generations ago in the songs of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. That same spirit that had run in a straight line from Frederick Douglass through to Martin Luther King Jr. The dream, as Dr. King so eloquently stated, that the nation one day would rise up and live out its creed, that all men were created equal.
So let freedom reign from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom reign.
You are not going to continue to get huge tax breaks when children in America go hungry.
And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. So let freedom reign.
This argument that the government should stay out, that it saps our pioneer stock. I used to hear that argument when we were talking about raising the minimum wage to $1.25.
So let freedom reign.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
So let freedom reign.
They have unlimited sums of money. They own much of this country. They control much of the media. They are very powerful. But we have something that they do not have. We have a united people. When we stand together, when we say enough is enough, this country belongs to all of us. When we do that, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.
So in my view, America stands at a crossroads. Today's date is the 3rd of October, 2015. As of this date, Bernie Sanders has received well over 1 million individual donations in small amounts. None of the establishment media could have predicted how successful Bernie's run would be. With the general election over a year away, how this will all play out is anybody's guess. Will Americans rise up and reclaim their democracy? Or will the corporate oligarchs continue to have their way? Only time will tell.
This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.